Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, June the 9th. And we will begin by having our Assistant Clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Ralu?
Here.
Bolin? Rosenbarger? Scamboleri?
Here.
Sims?
Here.
Flaherty?
Here.
Piedmont Smith?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
And Sandberg.
Here. This evening's agenda will include 3 items, and first we will have Ordinance 21-25 to establish the American Rescue Plan Act Fund, supporting the City of Bloomington's recovery from COVID-19. Next, we'll have Ordinance 21-28, which is an ordinance to amend 2023, which fixed salaries for certain City of Bloomington employees for the year 2021, to change the grade of existing positions in the Office of the Mayor, Parks Department, and the Utilities Department, revise job titles within both the police and fire departments to better reflect the nature of those positions. And then last, Ordinance 21-29, which will amend Ordinance 2020, which fixes the salaries of officers of the police and fire department for the City of Bloomington for 2021 and changes the title for the fire inspector. So first up, we have our Corporation Counsel, Philippa Guthrie, to lead us through Ordinance 21-25.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. Sorry, it just told me recording in progress very loudly.
I got that same message. It was a little distracting.
Philippa Guthrie, Corporation Counsel, and yes, I am here to talk about the ARPA account that we need to set up. So I'm sure you're all aware, it's been all over the news that the American Rescue Plan Act was passed by Congress in March. And unlike the CARES Act, this act, which is similarly designed to aid recovery from COVID, this has provisions for direct distributions to local governments. The CARES Act actually came through the state, which you may remember. But like the CARES Act, it also requires us to establish a separate account so that things can be accounted for. I'm guessing that's why. I'm not the accountant, so Jeff Underwood would probably know that, but I'm pretty sure that's why. So it's got to be done by ordinance. And we already have half of the funding. Our Bloomington's allotment is 22.1 million. That's an estimate, but it should be close to that. So we have approximately 11 million sitting, waiting to be deposited into this account. We applied for it immediately and it arrived. The ordinance will, well, we have to, first I should say, it's important to note that we don't have to spend it right away and it can be invested while we wait, but we do want to get it out there working for us. But it doesn't need to be officially obligated until the end of 2024, and then it does not need to be spent until the end of 2026. There are guidance documents available now. For a couple of months there weren't. We didn't know what it could be used for, but the Treasury Department issued a rule, promulgated a rule in May, and it specified, it's about 150 pages, but you're welcome to read it. It's actually interesting, but it's very long. And it specifies essentially 4 buckets that the funding can be used for. And I'm just going to read them because I don't want to misquote. The first is to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease 2019 or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. The second is to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers of the city that are performing such essential work, or by providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform essential work. The third is for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of the city due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the city prior to the emergency, that being 2019, or to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So there's a lot of discretion in there. And so we are also required, the council and the staff and the administration, to work together, but it would be adopted by the council to adopt a plan for how we would spend the money. There isn't a ton of guidance on what that plan should be, but it would essentially be, here's the money, here's a proposed project or use and the amount. We'll continue to look for information on how detailed that has to be, but right now we just have to refer to it in our ordinance. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and I thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. We will begin with council questions for either Ms. Guthrie or Mr. Underwood. Council members Cambalori.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. I'm not sure if this would be directed to you or to Mr. Underwood, but whoever has knowledge. Section 5 reads investment of fund. The money in the fund not currently needed to meet the obligations of the fund shall be invested in the same manner as other public funds may be invested. I know what invested means in my head, but could you clarify what it means in this context for these funds?
Sure. Essentially, we create multiple funds, as you see during budget time when we come and appropriate out of those, both state required and local ones. However, what we do is we have a single bank account with First Financial that all of our funds go into, and then we allocate the interest earnings from those. We have basically a money market account that's net of fees. So we negotiate a straight interest rate, and then we don't pay any fees on top of that. So it will earn at the same rate as all our other funds. So we're in compliance with the ordinance.
Got it. Thank you. That was helpful. That's all I have.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. The mayor has talked about using some of these funds for affordable housing, for support of the arts community and other things. And a strict reading of these four allowable purposes does not include any of that. So I was wondering if Ms. Guthrie could speak to how broadly we can interpret these guidelines.
Yes, it is actually very broad. You're right that when you read those four buckets, when you look at the rule, it's fleshed out pretty extensively. And they want this to be broadly available for recovery. And they've realized that the way that communities have been affected is very broad. So for example, the arts, I don't know if it's specifically mentioned arts, but it certainly mentions economic recovery, and the arts are a big part of the economic engine that runs our community. So I have no doubts that it could be used for that. Affordable housing is all over the rule. They actually specifically, there's a whole section on, they hope that these funds will be used. Let me find the wording because it's helpful. The pandemic has hit low income and communities of color more so than other communities. And for that reason, the funds would be allowed to be used for a broad range of things that disproportionately affected low income and communities of color. Some of the uses are addressing health disparities and the social determinants of health, investments in housing and neighborhoods, and housing, affordable housing is mentioned throughout the rule in various different spots, addressing educational disparities, promoting healthy childhood environments. And those are just some of the examples that they pose. There is a presumption that if the communities or the populations that you're helping are in qualified census tracts, that the fund use is appropriate. But they've also, there's much more guidance in the rule on ways that you can use it, and the areas that you've mentioned would be perfectly appropriate. I think it depends how you use them. And if we have any questions, there's actually a Treasury hotline. And we also will be consulting with a law firm that deals with Washington regularly, one of their government services groups, to help us make sure that we're spending it appropriately. Because the other issue is there are other buckets in the ARPA, not the pieces that are going directly to local governments, but there's a separate, I don't know if they call it a fund, but a separate use category, which is homelessness, for example. And there's another infrastructure that is not, I don't think, limited the way that it is for the local governments. So we're going to have to figure out for our plan, which monies we want to use from our ARPA allocation, or whether we want to try for some of these other state and federal funds that are categorized in certain ways. So it's rather complicated, but I feel fairly confident that the uses you've mentioned can be related either to supporting low-income communities or our economy.
Great. So what about expenses to reduce and prevent homelessness? Do you feel like the funds coming to the city could also be used for that purpose, or would that have to go through the state?
I think you could call that a low-income population. So I think it could be used if we wanted to use our funds. I think the advice we've gotten, and I've been to 2 different seminars and then other things that I've read and heard, the advice is that you should try and reserve the ARPA funds and go for other funds that can be used for specific purposes, and then use the ARPA funds as the backup, because that will make them more useful, really, the long term. I mean, you want to maximize your ability to use the funding available wherever it comes from.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I had more questions about the plan requirement that's mentioned in the federal legislation and as part of this ordinance. It sounded like from the presentation that we don't know a lot necessarily just yet, and that some of that will be forthcoming. But could you speak to any more detail? In particular, I'm wondering, I sort of imagine that we will have a plan that gets amended and updated and changed over time, because I doubt we'll have, for instance, a fleshed out plan for all 22 million from the start. I know the mayor's mentioned bringing some sort of appropriation ordinance in the fairly near term here. So it sounds like we'll need a plan before that. So yeah, I look forward to future details on that. And if we could hear a little bit more right now about how we plan as a legislature and fiscal body and as the mayoral administration to work together to develop that plan to guide these expenditures.
Well, we will definitely have to have a plan for whatever uses we plan to appropriate for. We don't have to have a full plan before we do our first appropriation. And both, I think the Treasury guidance as well, but the SBOA memorandum, definitely, it says explicitly that the plan can be amended and the ordinance can be amended. So we can do that whenever we want. Beyond that, I honestly don't know. I mean, we're going to have to figure out what uses we want to use the funds for. And then I would imagine, and Jeff, I mean, help me out here. You're the finance guy, an Excel sheet that details what the proposed uses are.
Yeah, it would be similar to kind of a program budget, Commissioner, Councilmember Flaherty, where you have the plan would define different buckets, and then there would be specifics on the uses of those that would match up with the appropriation ordinance. So essentially you would see, let's say that one of the buckets is homelessness, and a general definition of that. again, to keep it as wide open as we can under the federal guidelines. And then specific projects would be a part of the plan and the appropriation. So similar to a program budget where we take a department, we break it down by programs and put dollar amounts to it. Same thing that we did with the CARES Act money where, and Recover Forward, where we come in with high level buckets and then specific projects underneath those. And I know the mayor continues to solicit input from the council and welcomes that as he continued to work with departments and as we continue to get guidance from the feds and states and it changes. So, you know, we'll have to be flexible as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. My question is kind of a process question is, so the appropriations, if I understand it, are going to come about half of it's going to come 1 year and half of it's going to come the next year. Is that correct?
Actually,
No.
I think it'll come in three waves. Councilmember Smith is we'll do an appropriation that would be one for this year. So those things that we think we can get accomplished basically in the second half of the year. Then in August and September, as we present the budget, that would be the 2022 portion of it. And then as we present the 2023 budget, there would be the remainder of that. So it's a 24-month plan split over 3 fiscal years.
Okay, well, that's really helpful. So there'll actually be kind of 3 different plans for appropriations for each of these waves?
Yes, we would have to appropriate it. What we plan to do for the 2022 budget is much like we did for Recover Forward, is that we'll present in the budget the actual operating budget for each of the departments and funds, and then there'll be another column for ARPA that shows you specifically what dollars that department is asking to be allocated and specifically for what projects and programs.
Yeah, that'll be great. That's really helpful to understand that there's going to be probably 3 different iterations of a plan. Because I was wondering about at some of the early information was that the funds were going to come in 2 waves. But even though we're going to work on it as kind of like 3 different appropriations. And so does each appropriation then, is it irrelevant that the funds may come in 2 different waves? Is that?
No, it will be, we'll get 2 payments on the funds, and the timing obviously will be dependent on when we can actually use it. We fully anticipate that the appropriation for the 22 budget and the 23 budget will have that second payment in already. So it should be available to us. So, you know, again, the plan there'll be the top part of the plan will kind of be those high level buckets and definitions of what those mean. And then the detailed part of the plan will be the appropriation where it comes in and says, here are the departments, here are the dollars, here are the projects and programs that we would like to do.
Just one addition, the money is coming this year and next year. That they are sending it twice. They've already said that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. And thank you, Mr. Underwood. The only other thing that, as far as back to Mr. Flaherty's, he asked something about how we were going to do this together or in combination, or do you have any kind of insight as how that process might work?
Well, things that we have worked on in the past, usually the administration seeks information from counselors about what they're interested in, what their ideas are for using the funding. And then the administration and staff look at it. We will be charged with making sure that whatever the uses are, the proposed projects comport with the interim final rule and the act. And then I think there would probably be a process of negotiation the way we do with the budget in some ways. Just what projects do we think are going to really further the goals of the city to recover from the pandemic? And this is an opportunity to do some transformational things. It's such a large amount of money.
It is.
Yeah, to follow up on that as well, you know, we've had one discussion with you all, and you offered up some ideas on a high level. The communication that we sent out that was specifically talking about the budget also talks about ARPA and down below. So that's another opportunity for you all to shape that in what projects, programs you'd like to see, as well as what you think dollar allocations might be. So that's kind of wave 2. So once we get those back in by the 1st of July, that will spur additional discussions between the administration and the council on that first appropriation that we'll be putting together.
I appreciate that. I was going to throw in one encouragement that the Housing Insecurity Group that just finished up not too long ago is going to develop some recommendations on homelessness and some issues to alleviate and help that are going to be going towards the administration. So look forward to that, because those are coming, and there's some really well thought out ideas. So thank you.
Great.
Any additional council questions? Councilmember Rollo.
This is for Ms. Guthrie or Mr. Underwood. It is a substantial sum of money, and the county is getting a bit more, I understand. Is there any discussion about coordinating with the county on projects with a common objective in mind?
We would definitely like to look at that. We've talked about it internally. I don't know if the mayor's had a chance to talk to anyone over there, but that is definitely a good idea. I mean, there are issues that our community, you know, spans both the county and the city, and some of the issues are in common, as we know. So yes.
Okay, good.
In addition, that would also apply to other funds through the state or the feds that might be available outside of our money. Is how can we together go in and present a plan for some of those funds as well?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I think, first of all, thank you all for the presentation, Ms. Guthrie. I think I heard earlier that you said part of the process would be to take care of some of the projects or expenses by using our funds first and then using the ARPA money as backup. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, not our funds. Other
use
federal
other funds.
Yes.
Oh.
Other federal and state funds. There is just this enormous outflow of money from the feds, some of it coming through the states. And you want to be sure you're maximizing what funds you have a shot at. I mean, the ARPA we have, but it would be nice to supplement or use other funds first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess my question would be, what would this be? Some recovery, other funds that we have that aren't so much city funds? I guess I'm trying to understand what those other funds are.
Well, some of them, for example, are within ARPA. So there's a federal allocation of ARPA funding, as I recall, for homelessness, addressing homelessness.
Correct.
So I think if we have a major homeless initiative that we would like to institute, I think we ought to first apply for some of those funds and see if we get it, and apply those first. And then, you know, if we don't get the full project funded, then we use some of the ARPA funds. I'm completely making this up, and you can't hold me to any of it. I'll warn you, but that's the concept.
Okay, thank you. It's more of a process question. I just wanted to know what that would look like. But thanks for clarifying that, and I'm sure we'll get clarified even more as we move further. For an example, I understand the state has like a large sum of money specifically to be used toward homelessness or those with homeless challenge. And we may have an opportunity. I mean, there's nothing that I'm aware of, but I think we will have discussions with their assistance, or maybe matching some of our funds or utilizing some of their funds. So is that an example of using other funds that?
Yes.
Okay, if that was possible.
Right.
And I don't have a crystal ball or anything. I just know that's a possibility of this future discussion. So, okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mr. Underwood.
I would liken it to like federal highway projects where there's maybe, or federal grants where there's an 80-20 match. So that's 80% federal, 20% local. It would be something similar to that, where we go after the federal money first, and then if there's a gap or a copay, so to speak, then our money would go to fill in that gap.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Additional questions from council before we move to the public? All right, seeing none, let us see who is here from the public who would like to weigh in on Ordinance 2025 regarding the ARPA funds.
So I'd like to remind members of the public, if they would like to speak, they can use the raised hand function in Zoom, or they can send a message to the meeting host in chat. There are no messages in chat presently, and I do not see any raised hands.
All right, we'll wait just a minute in case anybody here has some things on their mind regarding the ARPA funding before we come back to council for any final comment, question, and a do pass recommendation.
Move do pass.
Right. We have a move do pass. Do we have any final comments before we go there? None? Councilmember Flaherty?
I would like one. Thank you. Sorry. Just a note that I want to continue to work on fleshing out this idea of a plan for spending the funds and how we're going to develop that and how it might be done in a perhaps more public facing way, maybe some public meetings. I also wonder about involving and inviting public input, whether in comment in a meeting like this or in about uses of funds, but also perhaps written ideas, proposals. I could imagine this being fairly informal, coming from individuals, but I could also imagine folks in our social services community, arts community, people who work on housing, et cetera, having expertise that they would like to share in this context. And perhaps it might be a good idea for us to kind of take that in and of course they could just email us and that sort of thing. But if there's a more formal process, it might be helpful for getting our residents more involved in our planning for these recovery funds. And then also just, I hope that the plan is done sort of in advance of the appropriation ordinances, that these aren't kind of running in exact parallel. I'd much rather us do the planning in a sort of iterative fashion where, of course, I think it makes some sense for the administration to sort of take input and put some things, on paper, perhaps based on a variety of inputs. But I guess I would like the opportunity for this council to also kind of weigh in and change or amend that plan as we do the planning for appropriation ordinances. So I just don't feel like that was always necessarily the case with kind of how we approached Recover Forward expenditures, for instance, last year. So hoping for something of a little bit of a different process. I think there's some things to think about how to do that, but I just wanted to mention that here and hope we can continue the conversation about how that might be a little different. Thanks.
Additional comments from council? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to agree with what Councilmember Flaherty said. I think it's important to have a public discussion about how best to use these funds and then also involve our county colleagues so that we can collaborate on common goals with the use of this money, because they're also getting a big chunk of money. And hopefully we can have at least, a first draft of the plan before we see any appropriation ordinance from the mayor. I know that he would like to bring an appropriation ordinance in July, so time is short. But I think we need to take an overall view of the most strategic way to get the most community benefit from these funds. And we need to have that in mind before we appropriate any of them, I feel. So I agree, we need to have more discussions and have them in a public sphere where we can get input from the many community stakeholders that we have here. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith, did I see a hand up?
I just wanted to say this is just a generational amount of money. And we have this great opportunity to do a lot of good for a lot of people. So I just want to be a cheerleader for us to do those things and to really help a lot of people out with this great amount of money that's coming our way to us in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard a move to pass. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, I will start with my left to the right as I see you. Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
And Councilmember Sandberg is a yes. And we thank you very much, Mr. Underwood and Ms. Guthrie. We will
Thank
be
you.
talking to you, I'm sure, quite frequently between now and the time we come up with this plan.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, we are going to hear Ordinance 21-25 that established, 2128, the ordinance to amend the Ordinance 2023, which fixes salaries for certain city and Bloomington employees for the year 2021. And with us this evening to present is our Director of Human Resources, Ms. Caroline Shaw.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Again, this is Caroline Shaw, the HR Director for the city, and I'm here to present two ordinances this evening. The first is 2128, which will amend Ordinance 2023, which set the salaries for 2021 pay grades and salary ranges for appointed officers, non-union AFSCME employees back during the 2021 budget process. This evening, which I try to do at least once a year, I come before you with more critical changes to an existing salary ordinance. This evening, we have 5 related to this ordinance. And as always, these recommendations that we put before you go before the Job Evaluation Committee, and we grade them using our standard process, which is a 7-point factor system. It helps us come up with a grade for the job. The first grade change is the Parks and Recreation Golf Course Superintendent. That was reviewed, and that one's going to increase from a 5 to a 6. The role of the Parks and Recreation Golf Course Superintendent has changed significantly over the years. And it was a miss last year, right? They missed the deadline. We should have changed this ideally during the 2021 budget. So this position, again, goes from a 5 to a 6, and the approximate fiscal impact is about $2,700. The next one is in the Office of the Mayor, and that is a digital communications specialist, which is currently a grade 6. And our recommendation is to call that a digital brand manager and make it a grade 8. And I made a mistake in the original legislation. So we should have an amendment, I think, or we will amend that. But I made a mistake and reported it as a 7. It should be an 8. The position has changed significantly since it was created back several years ago. And it was a part-time position back then. It's increased in duties and scope and complexity. And then the approximate fiscal impact for this grade change is about $6,000. And finally, the final grade change is the MS4 coordinator in the utilities department. That is changing from a 7 to an 8. And we've lost 2 employees to higher paying comparable public sector jobs in the last year in this position. And we realized the job description was missing some key information that subsequently increased the pay grade. And then the approximate cost of that is $4,300. And the other 2 have no fiscal impact. These are title changes to non-sworn officers in the both police and fire departments. The fire inspection officer is becoming a fire marshal, and that they're on the civil city ordinance as well. And then the 4 neighborhood resource specialists are being renamed as community service specialists. I believe Chief Deefkoff called each of you about that a while ago. So those are the changes. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, thank you. And if there is an amendment, why don't we go ahead and entertain that if someone is ready to move that? Yes, Councilmember Scambolari.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As Ms. Shaw has laid out, I would like to move Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2128.
Second.
All right. And if you can just give us a quick rundown.
Certainly. It reads Ordinance 21-28 shall be amended by changing the job grade for digital brand manager in the office of the mayor from 7 to 8. So this just corrects that error.
Okay.
And that's it.
That on the table. Are there any questions regarding that amendment? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, Ms. Shaw, you said the estimated fiscal impact is about $6,000. Is that right?
And yes, it is. And I would just also say at the end of the year, we may see that there's no fiscal impact to any of these changes because we have vacancies in departments and typically there's not much of an impact to the general fund, if any. But I know you all like to have me give you an approximate number. So that's what I always try to do.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on Amendment 1? Councilmember Scambolari.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Shaw, are all of the fiscal impacts that you've laid out due to salary? I'm assuming that, but correct me if I'm mistaken.
It's estimate and it's partly salary, but it's also the fringe benefits, the Indiana pension contribution that we do for every city employee has benefits, other taxes, FICA, things like that.
Okay, so the fiscal impact is based entirely on changes to the compensation package, not to any other impact on our budget, correct?
Right.
Got it. That's all I needed. Thank you.
All right. Any Councilmember Sims?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shaw. The question I have, initially this was to change it from a 6 to a 7, but that was the mistake. So in essence, we're going from a 6 to an 8.
Yes, I made a mistake. I do it all the time. And unfortunately, thankfully, most of the time it's a simple thing to fix, but this time it impacted all of you. And I also appreciate you and Councilmember Scambolari for sponsoring this amendment. It's basically just a typo. When I went back and looked at our records and we reviewed the job, it scored a solid 8 and I have no idea what I did wrong, but I somehow carried my mistake forward multiple times and we caught it early this week. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you both for helping me.
You're welcome. So different grades have different salary ranges, correct?
They do.
And I think the fiscal impact, if you recall, with what we're correcting now from 6 to 7 was less. Do you remember what that fiscal?
I was just thinking that someone was going to ask me that, but I printed a new memo for speaking to you this evening. I think it was a couple $1,000 approximately. I can email you back and let you know that. But if you would like to know, it's not a huge significant difference, but I don't have that right in front of me right now. I don't remember. I'm really sorry.
Okay, so no, that's fine. We could just flesh it out now, I think. If it's okay, Ms. Chair, if I can continue.
Yes, please.
Yes. So the difference between the 2,000 that we were aware of and the 6,000 now, approximately 4,000. So is that the salary that we're going to be paying for the person that's in this grade, or what we're doing now?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question,
well,
but
what's the differences in the fiscal impact?
It's both our approximate estimate of the salary impact plus the fringe benefits.
Gotcha.
So it's a moving number. And we would do a rough estimate for this purpose. And again, there may not be any fiscal impact when it all comes out at the end of the year.
Gotcha. And last question, if I may, and I'll show a bit of ignorance here, but can you briefly tell us what does a digital communication specialist do? And I know that's a new term, digital brand manager.
The digital brand manager.
What do they do?
I'm just going to refer to my notes if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So I'm just going to read a blurb to you that I actually captured for the last time I met with you all in the work session. The digital communication specialist is what we called it initially back in 2017 when we created it. And that was a part-time position back then. It was to assist the mayor's office in outreach to our community via digital media platforms. And as this position has grown, as digital media and other technologies have evolved, the job description no longer is representative of the scope and complexity of the work related to the position. The position now serves as an organization-wide resource to all departments regarding the following functions: social media administrator, social media content creator, media director, videographer and producer, photographer, graphic designer, creative director, brand manager, user experience officer, and they also have IT functions and webmaster sort of roles. It's a very complex, sophisticated job. It's grown a lot. It's been fun to watch from my perspective, seeing the role initially as the part-time position and then see how it's changed and what an impactful job it is.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it does, because I remember when we first established it. So I was just kind of curious as to what's the differences are now from a performance standpoint. So
thank you. It's grown significantly.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. And if there are no additional council questions, we'll go to the public if anyone wants to comment on Amendment 1, which pertains to the brand manager, and it's basically correcting an error from our initial information. Anyone here to comment?
Again, I would ask that members of the public who wish to comment use the raise hand function in Zoom or send a message to the meeting host in chat. I do not see anyone at this time, either in chat or with a raised hand.
All right. Let's think about coming back to council for any final comment here or a move to pass on Amendment 1.
Move to pass.
Second.
We have a second, right? I'll start with my left. No, let me start the other way. That's the way we usually do it when we're in chambers. Let me start with Councilmember Rallo.
Yes.
Member Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes.
And I am a yes. And so Amendment 1 passes. Now we're on to the full ordinance. Do we have any additional questions regarding that from council? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I just wanted to inquire as part of the internal review committee for these salary grades, are kind of equivalent jobs in the private sector considered as comparisons?
Not necessarily. Sometimes we do our best to look at the private sector, but these are already in pay grades and the grades are already established. And we private sector sometimes, but not always. And we also have to remember that our whole compensation package is also different than the private sector. So we do look at that as well.
I just asked that because, well, for two reasons. I think I heard you say that a couple of employees had left for higher paying jobs in the private sector. And then also when you were describing the new role of the digital brand manager, I thought, that's something that we see a lot in private corporations. And so I'm hoping that we can pay an amount that yields good candidates that earn, approximately as much or not much less anyway than in the private sector.
We do too. And IT positions are particularly challenging to be competitive with. The MS4 coordinator, where I talked about losing 2 people recently, those both went to other public sector employers that were both paying higher than us, the state and a county. I'm not sure which county. So we look at both and we do our best to be competitive. But I also remind people that we do have very competitive benefits that a lot of private sector employees cannot compete with, like our generous benefit time we give employees.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to make sure that's something that is kept in mind.
Definitely, thank you.
Additional questions from council? I see none, and so we'll move to the public for the ordinance on its whole as amended. Anyone here to comment?
I don't have any takers presently.
Okay, I don't see any hands flashing up there, so let us think about going back to council for any final comment on ordinance 21-28, fixing salaries for certain city offices. And seeing none, do we have a do pass recommendation?
Move to pass.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
I'm sorry, was that Smith or Piedmont Smith?
Smith, just plain old Smith.
Plain Smith? Yes.
And Councilmember Sandberg is a yes. And we thank you, Ms. Shaw, for your work on that. And you are not going anywhere because you are now going to present ordinance 21-29.
Yes, thank you for having me again. This one's very simple. We are changing the title in ordinance 2022, which fixed the salaries for the 2021 salaries of officers of the police and fire departments during the 2021 budget process. Again, just one change. It's a title change to the ordinance. A fire inspection officer is becoming a deputy fire marshal. And this is the recommendation of the fire chief and the recent organizational assessment the fire department went through.
Okay, so there's not a whole lot more to add with that.
Nope.
But let's see if there are any council questions for you on this round. Seeing some head shakes. I'm not seeing anybody. Anybody from the public?
And I'll just remind members of the public, if they'd like to speak, they can use the raised hand function or send the meeting host a message in chat.
And again, this is specific to a title change in the fire department.
There are no messages in chat and no hands raised.
All right, let us get back to council for any final statement, comment, or any question you may have thought of in the interim. Fairly straightforward, it would seem. All right, Ms. Shaw, thank you. Let us go to a do pass recommendation.
Move to pass.
Second.
Seconds.
Thank you. And let's start with Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo,
Yes.
Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
and I am a yes. And that concludes our business for this committee of the whole. Thank you, Ms. Shaw, and all who have attended this evening. And with that, we'll have a recommendation for adjournment.
So recommended.
So
All right.
moved.
I think that was moved and seconded all over the place. So we are now adjourned.